Welcome to our webinar, Advocacy Training for the 2024 Iowa Legislative Session. Focus of defending licensure for the benefit of the public and dietitians. As I said before, I'm the state policy representative, and I would like to pass it on to our public policy coordinator, Caitlin Sharman, to get us started.
Awesome. Thanks, Kat. So if you want to go to the next slide, there we go. This is our public policy team. So as Kat said, she is the state policy representative for our team. And then we have Tina Bauermeister, who is our consumer protection liaison. And as you can see on the slide, we do have a couple of open positions. So if you're wanting to get into the public policy team, learn a little bit more, dive a little deeper, we would love to have you. So we have two positions, the state regulatory specialist and the nutrition services payment specialist that are available. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so now I'd like to introduce our lobbyist team, Ede Walton. Matt Ede, a fifth-generation Iowan, is a native of Fort Dodge. He's been a lobbyist in Des Moines since 1993, and he represents clients before the Iowa legislature, governor's office, executive branch agencies, local governments, and Iowa congressional delegation. Matt graduated cum laude from Drake University in 1988 and from Drake University Law School in 1993. He lobbied for the Iowa Association of Realtors, the Iowa Association of Business and Industry, and was a partner in the lobbying firm Fitzgerald and Ede before establishing Ede and Heisinger in 2003. Matt and Kate Walton formed Ede Walton in 2015. Then we have Kate Walton. She grew up in Indianola and has more than 20 years of experience in government relations, advocacy, strategic guidance, and public policy. Kate has extensive expertise in working in state agencies, the governor's office, corporations, and nonprofit associations. Her past advocacy experience includes being director of state government relations with Unity Point Health and vice president of government affairs for the Iowa Medical Society, among other roles. Kate has a master's of education and human development and a bachelor of science in family social science, both from the University of Minnesota. Then we have Maddie Bradley, and Maddie has been a lobbyist with Ede Walton since 2020. Maddie is a native of Johnston, Iowa. She graduated with distinction from the University of Iowa, where she received her bachelor's of science degrees in both environmental science and public health. Maddie worked for 4 years as a research supervisor for the Iowa Public Policy Center, where she participated in a variety of health and environmental policy research studies. She's been involved in other policy work, including being appointed to the Iowa City Climate Action Commission and writing for the Iowa Policy Research Organization. She was also chosen as a representative to work with the Iowa Environmental Council, where she attended board meetings and served on the policy subcommittee. So you can go to the next slide, Kat. So with our webinar today, we want you to increase your understanding of the importance of licensure in the dietetics profession and current threats to the Iowa Board of Dietetics and dietetic licensure, learn how to effectively and confidently speak with legislators, and be able to identify key skills, strategies, and action steps around licensure advocacy and other Iowa Academy member policy priorities. So a question you may have asked, if you've been around the Academy for a while, is why having a lobbyist is important. They are a constant presence at the Capitol where we can't be as professionals with our own careers and our own life commitments. They have built relationships with legislators over the years and understand the issues that are important to each legislator. They have a wealth of knowledge of the legislative process that helps inform our team of the best route for advocacy. And really what we want you to know is successful advocacy takes time, it takes persistence and ongoing relationship building. It doesn't just happen with one email or just overnight. It's really better to be proactive and build those relationships with our legislators than reactive. And that's where our lobbyist team can really help us make those connections. You can go to the next slide, Kat. Thank you. So this year, our legislative priorities are to Number 1, maintain dietetic licensure. 2, to ensure adequate food and equitable healthcare access, and 3, expand access to dietitian-provided services. So our public policy team's current work, the things we're actively working on, is the defense of dietetic licensure and the Board of Dietetics, supporting the work of the Iowa Hunger Coalition and Iowa Healthy School Meals for All Coalition, also monitoring post-2023 SNAP legislation, and then specifically looking at House File 575, which is a bill to move all students who are eligible for reduced price meals to the free meals category. And then we are also monitoring summer EBT, which is a new issue that came up right around the end of this or the calendar year. So during this session, our team's #1 priority is to preserve dietetic licensure in Iowa and secure regulation of our license through our board. This is critical to the longevity of our profession and elevating the importance of dietitians and nutrition care. Our team of 3 is limited in time and resources as volunteers, and so we really have to stay dedicated to licensure this session. So you might ask, what about other issues that may come up during the session? Because there's always quite a few things that come through right at the beginning of session. So if an issue of interest in your practice area arises, our team can help provide you some assistance. We can help you with monitoring the bill, but we really also encourage you to monitor it as well. And we're happy to help you learn how to set up alerts on the legislative website, helping you to learn and understand the legislative process, to know where your bill stands. So if it's been assigned to a subcommittee or committee and what all those various steps mean. Connecting you with dietitians in your area. So if you're wondering if there's other folks in your area that you can band together to stand for the bill that you're interested in, we can help make those connections. Directing you to resources or key legislators on your issue. So maybe the committee chair that might be most beneficial in getting your bill assigned to subcommittee, for example. And then providing those key legislative dates and resources that might be beneficial to monitoring and watching your bill. So there's a couple of things that we can't do for you. We want to do everything we can, but we recognize our own boundaries and things that we need to be aware of as people with jobs and lives and everything else. So we can't take action on every bill that comes forward, especially at the beginning of session. There's going to be a flurry of activity. And we must remain focused on licensure until we hopefully have a positive outcome. We're still waiting on the bill language around the boards and commissions review committee's recommendations. We can help you with finding when subcommittees are, so we can direct you to that resource, which is subcommittees are where you can really give that direct public input, but you might need to attend those. We probably won't be able to attend on your behalf. The other thing is emailing your legislator for you. An email coming from an organization does not resonate with legislators as much as your voice is as their constituent. You're the one who votes for them and gives them their job there at the legislature. So it's really important that you are the one reaching out. They need to hear those on the ground stories and impacts in the communities that they serve. All right, I'll pass it back off to Kat.
Great. Thanks so much, Caitlin. That was a really helpful overview of our committee and, how we operate and what we're focused on. And like you said, we really want to encourage everybody to get involved in advocacy in the areas of interest to them. So unfortunately, we can't always take on all of that work, but we really want to celebrate and give you as many resources as possible to do that work yourself. So the big thing may have heard of already is the threat to our Board of Dietetics and Dietetics licensure. So I just wanted to give some overview and background information of what we know, what's going on. So along with, all of the government reorganization business, Kim Reynolds put together a boards and commissions review committee to look at all the boards and commissions and try to streamline and reduce and consolidate them. So this committee ended up putting out some initial proposed recommendations in late August. These were really vague. All it really said on that report was Board of Dietetics eliminated. So we didn't have a ton of information to go off of. But they were released for public input over that next month. And we actually were able to attend the September 6th meeting where the recommendations were open for input. And I was able to attend on behalf of the Iowa Academy. And I had about 2 minutes to kind of plead our case on why our board is important. And we were really excited. I mean, we worked really hard those couple of weeks to kind of get some advocacy efforts. This was kind of a surprise to us when it came out. But I was really pleased with the amount of people that did join in and signed our petition and sent in emails to the Board and Commissions Review Committee. So if you were one of those people, thank you so much for your efforts and kind of coming along with us when that hit back in September. Unfortunately, the report did come out on September 29th, and this is what it said. The Board of Dietetics has met 5 times over the past 2.5 years, has received 0 complaints against licensees and 0 complaints of unlicensed practice. If credentialing of dietitians is deemed necessary, the state should register dietitians as credentialed by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Now, you'll all have the slides, all of these slides after the session if you want to see the link to the report and look at it yourself. But we weren't quite sure, where our licensure stood in this recommendation. It's a little bit vague. At the time of the report coming out, we were still in the process of hiring a new lobbyist this year and in transition. We had heard differences of opinions on whether this language meant that our licensure was at risk as well. So that's why we have such a heavy focus on the licensure piece and all of this as well, because our licensure could be at risk with this language as well. And even if they got rid of the Board of Dietetics, it does put us at a little bit more of a risky situation. According to our lobbyist team, and maybe you'll go into more detail, Maddie, later, but the understanding is that when a bill comes out on this, it will primarily reflect what the report reflected, but we're just waiting to see the final bill language. So you might ask, why is our board so important? So there's 3 dietitians and 2 public members on the board. When they apply to be on the board, they have to be politically diverse. So they share what political party they're at, and it has to be balanced in that sense. They end up vetting all of the licensure applicants to make sure that those providing nutrition care in Iowa are, credible and competent, and all for the protection of the public, so that the public knows when they, see a healthcare professional that's a dietitian, that they're going to receive a certain quality or standard of care. So they also review different complaints about licensees and non-licensees. Although it's really not clear online how licensee complaints are made. If you go on the website, you have to type in a licensee number. So that's one thing that we're looking into as well, is just, they said that there was low complaints. Is it because it's really not straightforward how to put a complaint against a non-licensee who might be providing dietetics care outside of their scope of practice, but is not a dietitian? Other important things is that they do engage in rulemaking around our licensure. So it's really helpful to have dietitians involved in that process of looking at the way the licensure rules are and making sure it fits our profession and it's as least burdensome as possible for dietitians to have licensure in our state. And so it just gives us more of a voice, and the public more of a voice in licensure decisions. Some other things to know is that there are no taxpayer expenses associated with our board. It runs off its own fees. The board meetings are efficient. They meet once a quarter, sometimes virtually as needed, and they do compensate the board members that are involved. Okay, so then now I want to go into a little bit of information about why licensure is so important. And if you have any questions at all on all of this, please feel free to ask some questions in the chat. Tina, Kaylin, if you want to kind of keep an eye on that, let me know if any questions come in that we can respond to. Because we know that licensure and our board is very confusing. And so we want to help as much as possible for members to understand and dietitians to understand about licensure. So it gives more oversight and authority to our state in regulating the dietetics profession. It's primarily protection for the public. Like I said, licensure ensures that our Iowa citizens know that when they're going to a licensed registered dietitian, they should be able to expect a certain level of care and that there is oversight and authority looking at that. It also provides more access to medical nutrition services for people in Iowa. A couple of ways that it does this. Licensure is often used by insurance companies and employers to make sure that dietetic practitioners do meet professional competence. Licensure is something that most healthcare professionals have because they are providing such a niche level of care. And dietitians are similar to that as well. We want to be seen as a healthcare professionals that we are, and especially in that clinical sense, that really complex quality of care that we're providing that could cause harm to people if it's not regulated. But essentially, licensure, ensures them that we meet the professional standards and in order to be reimbursed for our services and be recognized as a healthcare professional to be reimbursed. And so with better reimbursement opportunities amongst insurance companies, that provides better access to medical nutrition services for Iowa citizens and also more employment opportunities for dietitians as well. Without licensure, we also wouldn't be able to participate in the Dietetic Licensure Compact, which I'm going to talk a little bit more on this slide. So if you haven't heard of it yet, they're at the national level of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. They have been working really, really hard on establishing and setting up a compact for licensure. Essentially, the compact with states that are participating, it makes it easier to have licensure in multiple states. So again, this helps give access and continuity of nutrition care. It increases the amount of telehealth opportunities, both for dietitians to have income opportunities and also people to receive nutrition care, especially in rural areas. Or if you live kind of on the border and you might see a patient in one state, but then they go home or they move somewhere else. It just gives more flexibility. For those that move around a lot, such as active duty military or their spouses, it also makes it easier for them to get employment in different states. And then overall, it just decreases administrative burdens as well and just makes licensure a little bit more streamlined and straightforward. And so we would not be able to participate in this compact as a state if we don't have licensure. So that's another reason why it's really important for us to be able to maintain licensure and make it easier for dietitians in our state to be licensed in a variety of different states. Okay, I'm going to pause for a moment because that was a lot. And I know I talk quickly, so I'm trying to slow down. But I'll just see if there's any questions about our Board of Dietetics or the Licensure Compact or licensure in general.
This is Kathleen. I have one question. So the last I looked, the only state that even had any legislative ability pending was Ohio. So have we done anything to make sure that our license would be within the compact then?
Oh, that's a great question, Kathleen. I didn't quite mention. So Iowa would be eligible to participate in the compact, and we have had meetings with the policy staff at the academy about participating in the compact. Unfortunately, just with all of the stuff happening with our board and our licensure this session, it just didn't seem feasible for us to take action on it this legislative session. But we hope that we might be able to participate in a future session. We're very interested. We think it would provide a lot of benefits. I'm not quite sure the current status amongst the academy of what states are involved, but we are starting the session, and so a lot of states are probably gearing up to introduce it, and so we'll just have to keep an eye on the different states that are passing legislation. Thank you. Did that answer your question?
I think so, because the last I read, we had to have 7 states to really get the compact going. The other concern I have is I've worked on a lot of legislative teams in the past and contacted a lot of legislators. Most generally, emails are not the best mode of contacting them because, as Senator Yoakum said, she gets 300 to 400 emails every day. So the chances of yours being read is slim to none, and probably closer to none than slim. Her recommendation, as well as Bob Kresick, a lot of them, in at least in my area, in the Northeast Iowa area, all of them, is to use their cell phone and to text them a message of either, "This is Kathleen, I'd like to talk to you about licensure. When is a good time?" And then they usually will shoot you back another text. So email is not always the best method. So I would recommend strongly contacting them through a text message, then having your bullet points written down so that you can discuss everything succinctly when you do get a call back.
Thanks, Kathleen. And yeah, we'll go into a little bit more on that in some future slides, and I'm interested for Maddie and Matt to chime in as well. One thing that I will say is that sometimes, just to my understanding, some of the apps sometimes summarize like big themes and stuff. And so sometimes just having a lot of people talking about one issue, maybe they're not looking at the email in depth, but they can maybe start to notice that a lot of people are talking about a certain issue. And so just the overloading of numbers, if we have like 20 dietitians that are just saying something about licensure, that might pique their interest a little bit more. So definitely calling them and talking to them, and us having lobbyist teams too, to be able to interact with legislators a little bit closer, is more engagement. But I don't want people to think that their email doesn't matter. Sometimes just getting larger numbers can just spark that, oh, a lot of people are talking about this and interested in it as well. But yeah, Maddie, I guess you can chime in now, or if you have thoughts on that later.
No, I think that's exactly right. And yeah, email might not be the number one effective way, but it certainly helps. If you can have a multitude of ways that you're reaching out to your legislator, that's even better. It can also be a good way to kind of get a foot in the door to start building those relationships with your legislators. But they do get a lot of emails a day. I will concede that for sure.
Great. If anybody else has questions, feel free to ask in the chat. I'm seeing some things coming through, but I don't know. Okay, so it looks like we have a question about, what does the state benefit from getting rid of the board? What is their side of the story? Is it just simply due to the minimal number of complaints and they find it unnecessary to have? Maddie, do you want to tackle this one?
Yeah, and Matt, go ahead and jump in whenever. There has been a large movement by the legislature and the governor's office for a realignment, efficiencies to be made, a reorganization. Obviously, there was the big state reorganization bill last year. And so to me, this just kind of falls on top of that. I think there was a desire to eliminate a certain amount of the boards and commissions, and unfortunately, the Board of Dietetics kind of fell under that category. I'm not sure that there are tons of legislators, gunning for the Board of Dietetics. It's just kind of how it's ended up at this point in time. Matt, do you have anything?
Yeah, the only thing I've heard just from one legislator, and I think it was in some written document, is about the lack of complaints, and therefore it's not necessary. It's a big jump from that to not having a license. We've had really good conversations. I'm confident, we'll get the licensure. And then after that, what happens to the board? I think it'll probably differ between the House and Senate. And we've been working these people, the two floor managers, for quite a while. But I feel we're as well positioned now as we could be. So, and a lot of that was done, before session. Now we're going to need help with grassroots, as some of the questions have come up, Kat, from communicating with legislators to support what we're trying to do at the Capitol.
Great, thank you. Yeah, from my viewpoint, it looks like they're just trying to cut them in general, just so they can say that they cut and streamlined a lot of the different boards and commissions. But as far as our board is concerned, I mean, there's no taxpayer expenses involved, so that's not a concern. So really, I mean, the only thing they state is the number of complaints that like we do or don't have. Okay, well, we have one more question and then I'm going to pass it off to Maddie and Matt just to give us kind of an overview of this upcoming session and just to hear from them who are a little bit more experienced and experts in advocacy to discuss. So it looks like Ann Scott said, is the compact still in intro phase? Yes, this will be the first session that they're trying to get 7 states to all introduce it and to start the compact. Okay, I'm going to pass it off to Maddie and Matt.
Sounds good. Thanks, Kat. So yeah, Matt and I are going to talk a little bit about the legislative session and then the political landscape up at the Capitol. So we had our first day of session on Monday, which was January 8th. Though it feels like we're already a few weeks in, even though we're only 1 week in at this point in time. But you can see on the right-hand side there kind of our session timetable and which has all the important dates that you're going to have during the legislative session. One of those, so Iowa is unique in that we have 2 funnel dates, which are essentially hurdles that bills have to get over in order to still remain viable to become laws. So that first funnel date is February 16th. To pass this funnel, a bill will have to get through a subcommittee and then through a committee in one chamber in order to remain viable to move forward. Bills that don't meet these criteria, we refer to as dead bills. So that week of first funnel is usually pretty hectic and busy, lots of people running around trying to get their bills past that subcommittee and committee. And then also on there, we actually have a second funnel. That's going to be March 15th. And for a bill to remain viable past this week, it'll have to have passed out of one chamber and then through a committee in the other chamber. So those are kind of 2 big dates to keep in mind as you're thinking about session and how bills might be progressing. And then we've also got the end of session on there, which is April 16th. We are in the shorter session of the 2-year General Assembly this year, so it technically lasts for 100 calendar days. However, this date is only the day that which per diem runs out for the legislators, and it's not necessarily the date that session will be done. Traditionally, it's not the last day of session, and we do expect it to run past that April 16th date. Matt, has there ever been a session that ended on or before?
There was one that ended like in March. I can't remember all the circumstances, but other than that, I would say about 90% of them will go over.
You can go to the next slide. Unless feel free to jump in with questions if anyone has.
I did see a question or a comment from Jenna
Okay.
on the chat, and anything you can do with Jason Schultz, he will have a huge impact on the licensing bill, boards and commissions. Just a huge impact. So yes, is the short answer.
Yeah, and Matt, I saw that too. We're getting some questions about kind of the difference between our credentialing and registration and licensure. So
Yeah.
registration, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, and I know Kate, Maddie, and I have discussed that in depth, and we've got a strategy aimed at the House side on that, and until the bill gets kind of moving here, and the conversations get a little more detailed, amendments drafted and such. But we've positioned ourselves pretty well. I'll let Maddie, she's kind of been captaining that, so.
Yeah, so I guess just for your guys' information as well, and maybe what to say to legislators. So, and other people, please feel to chime in as well. Sometimes it's hard to figure out the best language to try to describe this, but our registration just sets kind of minimum qualifications for our training. And like the number of hours we've practiced. And it doesn't really go into as much depth and as much oversight into like our actual practice and our ability to be competent providers of care in the state. So registration is kind of a very like light blanket over our profession and our, credibility and competence. It basically just says that we met certain education standards, we did our supervised practice, and we keep up with our continuing education. Licensure goes a little bit more in depth about our competence and quality of care in the state, and is not new to us. I mean, doctors, nurses, physical therapists, athletic trainers, it's kind of a standard for healthcare professionals that provide really complex care to have licensure. And so to say that we don't need it for our profession is basically saying that, anybody could just provide the care that we provide and that
Right.
it couldn't cause, harm and concern.
Yeah, I know a good example. I was talking to Ann Meyer, state rep from Fort Dodge, and I think Maddie was with me at a fundraiser or something, and she was shocked to hear
She was.
that licensure wouldn't be required. So again, I feel really good about where we're at, and I'm not even mentioning registration. I don't even think about that.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. So hopefully that gives everybody a little bit. I know it's really confusing. It's taken me some time to figure out the best language for all of it. And I know sometimes it just seems like it's just another fee that we have, but it really is important. And it puts us on another higher level of care as other healthcare professions. It's how insurance companies reimburse healthcare professionals, and just a variety of different reasons why it's important. Okay, now we'll continue to answer questions. I'll continue about the political landscape this session.
Sounds good. Yeah, so it's really important when we're thinking about how to advocate for issues up at the Capitol to keep in mind what the political landscape looks like. Republicans have had a trifecta since 2016, so they control the governor's office, the Senate, and the House by pretty strong margins. So much so that the Democrats really have little to no kind of bargaining power as to what goes on up there at this point in time. So of the 100 members of the Iowa House of Representatives, you have 64 Republicans and 36 Democrats. Of those 64 Republicans, actually 25 were completely new to the state house last year. And then of the 36 Democrats, 15 were new. So we had 40% of the legislators in the House last year that were completely new freshmen, which is a pretty significant portion of the legislature. Matt, I don't think they've ever had that many new people up there that don't really know the process or the issues super well yet.
Yeah, I'll just add one more thing, Maddie. It's becoming for lobbyists, and this has happened in Kansas, happening in a lot of red states. It's becoming kind of a three-party system and strategy. We have your kind of mainstream conservative Republicans, and then you have this far right group, which is growing in Iowa. Then you have the Democrats. So, and this is really a new phenomena that we have to strategize on really two Republican parties and who's going to talk to whom and what resonates with, the Freedom Caucus, the far right members, and what will resonate with your more suburban R. So it's been pretty fascinating, but it's happened quickly, and it certainly will affect this bill and how we lobby it. So just some added context.
Yeah, I would say there's about 10 to 15 of those legislators that fall into that Freedom Caucus category. And a lot of that was driven by the new legislators that were elected last year. A lot of them were much more far right than their predecessors. And then we have the Senate. So there are currently 34 Republicans and 16 Democrats in the Senate. With I think 5 of those Republicans were new and 2 of the Democrats were new last year. Interesting, just numbers wise, the Republicans actually have a super majority in the Senate right now, which means that they technically would not need any of the Democrats present to have a quorum. Another thing I would add here is, there is a Republican trifecta, but just because that there is a Republican trifecta does not mean that they always agree. I know we talked a little bit about that kind of Freedom Caucus in the House, but there's not even necessarily agreement between the governor's office, the Senate leadership, the House leadership. You have pretty big distinctions between what they want to do on varying bills. Did you want to add anything to that, Matt? Okay, we can go to the next slide. So since we still have not seen the boards and commissions bill language, the bill has not yet been assigned to a committee. However, we do expect it to go through the state government committees. So this means that the legislators that are on the state government committees are going to be super important in the advocacy process. So we put together some of the leadership of those committees, just so you guys are aware of who will be big players in this space. So on the House State Government Committee, you have Jane Bloomingdale. She is from Worth County, I believe, and she is the chair of that committee. You have Austin Harris, who's from Appanoose County, who is the vice chair, and he was newly elected last year. And then you have the ranking member, Amy Nielsen from Johnson County, who's the Democrat on that committee. And then if you want to go to the next slide. On the Senate side, we have Senator Jason Schultz, who's going to be super important. He's the chair of the Senate State Government Committee. He's from Crawford. Senator Chris Knoyer of Clinton is the vice chair. And then Senator Tony Bisignano from Polk is the ranking member on that committee. I would just add here, so another kind of important role is going to be who manages the bills in each of these committees. We do believe that the manager of the Senate bill is going to be Senator Chris Knoyer. So that means she's going to be the one that works on amendments. She's going to serve on the subcommittee, present the bill to the committee, and then she'll also give a little speech about the bill before it's voted on at the floor when it goes to the chamber to be voted on by the entire Senate. And then for the House side, if you want to go back a slide, sorry. We believe the manager will either be Representative Bobby Kaufman, who is on the State Government Committee, or Representative Austin Harris. They are both going to play a huge role in the bill, in the amendments that are going to come up on the bill, but there has not been a decision made between who's going to run the bill. But both are going to be really influential. Representative Kaufman is the chair of the Ways and Means Committee. He's from Wilton, Iowa. Matt, do you have anything else you want to add on the?
Well, our firm couldn't have a better choice of floor managers. We've had a really close working relationship with Knoyer, Bobby, and Austin Harris. So feel really good about that. We've just been fortunate to have a lot of issues in their jurisdiction and raise a lot of money for them. And
we felt pretty lucky when we heard who was going to be
yes,
managing the bills. So, so yeah, we think we're in a really good place with how we expect that to go. And then we're just gonna, I know with Tina as well, we're gonna talk a little bit about some advocacy tips and strategies. So I can get us started if you wanna go to the next slide. So just for some tips for when you're advocating to your legislators, something really, really important to keep in mind is that effective advocacy is year round. It's not just sending an email when you see a bill. It's fostering those relationships all throughout the year in as many avenues as you can. So when you do come to them with a bill, they know who you are, they know your face maybe, and they're going to be much more receptive to what you have to say. That doesn't mean that you can't be an effective advocate if you haven't been doing advocacy year round. You still should reach out to your legislators. But it does really help if you kind of make it more of a relationship than just a one-time email or phone call. And to that point, relationships are really key. That's a majority of our job up at the Capitol is, building on our relationships and trying to utilize those. So any way that you can build those with your legislators is going to be helpful. I know I heard a story from one senator who her son's friend from high school band, his mom worked in public health, and now she always goes to her for public health, any questions that she has related to public health legislation. So it can be any sort of connection that you can find. And I think it's important to remember that their job is to hear from constituents. So it may seem scary, it may seem hard to reach out, but that is really what they want to hear from you, and that is their role. That's what they got in there for. So it's just part of the process is you as a constituent reaching out to them, letting them know what you think they should do on the bills. And on top of that, just you have to start somewhere, right? It may seem like a big task to start forming a relationship with a legislator, but start with that email or a phone call or go to one of their forums or follow them on social media, and then you can really build on that from there. Did you want to add anything to that, Matt? Are you good? Okay. And then Tina, were you wanting to take these or do you want me to?
I just kind of wanted to add that, you know, like you said, they are people too. And so you might feel nervous talking to them, but, and that's okay. And I think they're used to that. So just kind of be yourself and just know that you're the experts. So if you're telling a story and maybe, if we have time at the end, Maddie, maybe you and I can do just a mock, conversation. You're the experts in the field. They probably don't know what you do day to day. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're talking to them. And actually just let them know what it is that you do and ask them if they have any questions.
Yeah, that's a really good point. They have 1,000 different subjects that they're supposed to know about each day. And so they do really look to you to tell them about what you do, what the bill means, how it's going to affect you. They can't just know that off the top of their head.
Yeah, when I spoke to my representative, I found out that, well, first of all, I asked him if he knew what a registered dietitian nutritionist was, and he said, yes, I have a family member that had to go see a dietitian because that person had diabetes. And I was like, guess what? I'm a diabetes educator. So it kind of just got the ball rolling. And now whenever I speak to him or send an email and I say, remember that conversation that we had about your family member who has diabetes? And he always says, yes, I remember. So, you never know what their experience is going to be or how that's going to resonate.
Do you want to cover these couple of slides as well?
Sure. Yep. And like Maddie said, make sure you do sign up for their newsletters, and following in social media is a really good idea because, you might see something on their social media site that says, they went hunting or something. So you could always lead with that and say, oh, I just saw that you went hunting, my son hunts, or, just any connection that you can find. Newsletters are great. I follow my representative, and you don't have to be, the same, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. Just follow what they're putting out. Attending town halls, that's really important too. I think ours are called, and Manny, correct me, is it eggs and what did they call their
Like eggs and issues or something?
shoes? Yeah. And they do try to go around to the different districts. So try to attend those. And, those are kind of neat forums too, because you can bring anything up that you want. So virtual events, local community events, and of course the email and the calling. And we heard earlier today about maybe not just emailing, but following up with a text. Or I know our senator, he moved away, but he definitely was more texting than email, and he was really good about getting back if you would text him. So. Did you want me to do these two? Okay. Okay, so again, you want to maybe lead with a story or a few facts and figures, kind of like we talked about with, asking if they know who RDNs are, what we do. Be very clear, maybe even tell them ahead of time that you're going to be brief. Specify or ask, and then offer your help to be a resource. That would be a really great thing if they had questions about nutrition and dietetics, if they offered, if they called you and asked a question. And then, of course, you always want to follow up, thank them for their time. And sometimes you might even want to say, congratulations on your on your reelection, things like that, and be persistent. And advocacy takes time, building those relationships. It doesn't happen overnight. So the stories are huge, though, because that is definitely going to be something that they're going to remember.
Yeah, I would just really echo the thanking them for their time portion of that. They get yelled at so much. And so they really do appreciate when you can say something positive or thank them for something that they've done. Or even just thank them for taking 5 minutes with you. I mean, I think that really does help to facilitate those relationships. And also, I would just add, even if you vehemently disagree with things that they have done, be kind. Try not to be too argumentative. I know it can be hard, but I mean, what you're wanting is for them to respond to you in a positive way, right? And no one really responds to just being yelled at. So I think that's something that a lot of legislators are experiencing, and something that can kind of be a barrier to advocacy.
Yes, you're right about that. I did go to one of the eggs and I can't remember what the rest of it's called, but yeah. And oh my gosh, my representative was just getting pummeled by a lot of people. And so I kind of went up and said, oh, I'm sorry that you're having to, deal with this, but, so you're right. They deal with a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard a couple of stories of people just canceling all their forums. They don't do them anymore.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's another kind of effect that we don't want to have, right? So,
Mhm.
does anyone have any questions? I guess I haven't looked at the chat.
I don't see any in the chat, but of course, please, if something comes to mind that you hadn't thought about, but you have a
Yeah.
question later, chime in.
I'll comment on the compact. I don't think there's a lobby firm. I know there isn't. We've done more compact work for different folks than anybody. Kate, who's on another call right now, has a real expertise. I think, we're going to have to take care of the licensing issue here for sure, this year, and just test the waters on how confusing it's going to be for legislators to jump in, on the compact issue. We're just going to have to see how cantankerous, the whole boards and commissions thing is, how much the governor plays there, because that bill is going to change dramatically, in my opinion, from what she would like to see. So, I just want you to know we're very experienced on compact bills. We understand, the process and who we have to talk to and things like that, and optimistic we can get it done. Part of that this year, I think we absolutely have to take care of your licensing, obviously, and your board representation, et cetera. So I just wanted to get that out there. I didn't want anybody to think we're not talking about it.
No,
And
thank you, Matt.
yeah.
Yeah. Understandably, it's really hard for us to kind of jump into that this session, but it's definitely a great optimistic talking point to use with legislators. I mean, that's just different ways that we can help to reduce the burdens that come with licensure and just make it easier to get licensed in different states. And it sounds pretty optimistic. It sounds like a lot of compacts have been passed with different professions in Iowa. So we're optimistic about it in the future. And then Beth had a great question. If the board goes away, who would voice our concerns to when there is questionable activity? And so I guess we have a lot of those same questions as well. I don't know, Maddie, if you guys have heard any answers from legislators on just what that structure would be if our board was removed, but our licensure, retained. Like, what would complaints look like? How would being able to give input on licensure and rulemaking happen? I think, to my understanding, those are kind of the questions that we're asking too, about like, well, do you have a plan for what's going to happen if you remove our board? And we have those similar concerns, Beth. Matt, have you heard any responses from legislators?
I would say absolutely. Those are also the questions that we're asking legislators. I don't really think that those details have been flushed out yet. No one seems to have a real good answer for us. So we're also, eager to hear what they're thinking in that way.
Thank you. But yeah, Beth, that's a great question. And that's a great question to ask legislators as well. And just kind of as a point of like why it's important to retain our board. Margaret, is there any possibility of putting different boards together?
So there was kind of movement of a lot of the health professions boards. One way that some of them were moved around was to be put into a rehabilitative board with certain professions. And then I believe there's a conglomerate of a couple other boards. So there are kind of two ways that boards are being moved. It's either into putting boards together, or boards are being moved into subcommittees under the Board of Medicine. So that could be a possibility for us. I think we still just need to wait and see what the language looks like that comes out of the bill. We assume it's going to look like the recommendations, but there's been a lot of people trying to get their hands on this bill and make changes, so we just have to wait and see what that actual language says.
Okay, thanks, Maddie. Yeah, we're definitely in support of, ideally we'd love to keep our board if we can at least, maintain dietitian presence underneath like another board. That would also be great, but we'll just have to kind of see how it plays out. Tina and Maddie, do you guys want to kind of do a mock example of what it might look like talking to a legislator?
Sure. Yeah.
I know Matt is our firm's role play
True.
guy. Do you want to
True.
jump in here,
Oh
Matt?
yeah, Matt, do you want to do it?
No,
Kate told me I had to, get you to do
no,
it. So
I'm very awkward at that, actually.
you'd be a perfect Jason Schultz.
Oh my gosh. I've had to beg Jason for so many things over the years.
Okay. Are you ready, Matt?
Oh boy. Who am I?
You're a representative in my, I'm one of your
Okay, Maddie.
Would that be
It'll
John Wills?
Yeah, he's mine. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
you can be John Wills, Matt.
I could be John Wills.
You could.
Hi, Representative Wells. I don't know if you remember me, but I'm Tina Bauermeister. I live in Northwest Iowa. I'm one of your constituents. And I just want to briefly talk to you about retaining the Board of Dietetics and the importance of retaining licensure for registered dietitian nutritionists. You remember when we talked last time that you did have a family member that had a chronic condition that you needed to see a dietitian for. Do you remember
Oh
that?
yeah, I do recall that. Yes.
Okay, well, great. So you know that for me personally, I work in a rural hospital and I provide MNT, which is medical nutrition therapy for chronic diseases like obesity, diabetes, GI disorders, but also I work with inpatients as well as outpatients, and I provide calculating the needs for tube feedings and IV nutrition. So I just wanted to let you know the importance of being licensed, and and so licensing protects the public from harm so that you have a qualified nutritionist in the hospital, and the Board of Dietetics facilitates that. Do you have any questions about any of that? Any of the
Well,
things that
first, Tina, I want to thank you for what you do and all the services that you provide to North Iowans. And you're right, I do have a relative that has utilized services like you described, and I know how important it is. I want to say that first of all. This is a big bill, and I haven't seen it yet. I know they're still working on it. I'm sure going to keep your concerns in mind as this progresses. I will say one thing I've heard in particular to your profession is that there hasn't been a lot of complaints, which I think is great. And of course, one of the primary functions of the board is to deal with bad actors. And I know there's some in my caucus that are saying, well, if they don't have any complaints, do they really need them? And so that's something that, I'm gonna have to talk about with some other members in my caucus. But I know that's been discussed. I'm not saying I'm for that or agree with it, but I know that's out there.
Thank you for that. Well, let me just give you an example of something that happened up here. We had a girl who was not a licensed dietitian. She was just someone who was a health coach. And she was giving nutrition advice, doing grocery store tours and telling people that all the toxic materials that were in the grocery store, with everything they sold there, there was, I don't know what she said, some crazy number of toxins that were there. And she also would show Netflix documentaries at our library. And one of them was called Statin Nation, and she was telling people not to take their statins, which, if you know, statins are necessary and they're life-saving medications for to prevent strokes and heart attacks. And so she was basically practicing well, not only dietetics, but medicine. And she was giving erroneous information to these people, and they were listening to her. So maybe we haven't had a lot of complaints for our board, but surely something like that would need to be stopped, because she definitely was posing harm to the public. So maybe our board is doing their job, and they're things like that are being stopped, but but thank you for that information. I
Well, I
really,
was unaware of that. That's pretty egregious, and I do think there ought to be oversight on something like that. So I will take that story back to the caucus when we talk about the bill, and please give me your contact information, and I'll have, if questions come up, I want to, make sure I talk to you. And thanks for taking time again.
great. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
Let's give them a round of applause. That was excellent. Thank you so much, Matt and Tina. That was perfect. I was trying not to laugh too much at first, but you were a really good legislator, Matt. Okay, so I want to recognize we only have a couple more minutes left. Different ways you can take action. We do have advocacy at the Capitol this next Tuesday. Please let us know if you're interested in attending. We're going to go and try to talk to some legislators about this potential bill and just advocate for our profession. As always, you can find your legislator at this link. These slides will be available. The easiest thing you could possibly do is we do have a petition where you can sign your name. That is probably the easiest advocacy task. If you want to get more involved, like we said, we're only 3 people on our committee, and we spend lots of hours. Sometimes I spend up to 8 hours every week on some of this stuff. And so we just really need lots of help. So if you're willing to help out in any small way, we do have a task force that meets every other Friday. Or even if you just want to email us and ask us what kind of things you can get involved in, we have plenty of volunteer tasks. We meet once a month for our public policy team. If you're interested in just joining as a micro volunteer or holding an official position, please participate in action alerts. I know they seem very simple, but again, sometimes just getting mass amounts of numbers of people talking about an issue is important to spark attention. We have lots and lots of different resources on our website. We're going to send the licensure advocacy handouts out for everybody that registered for this webinar. And again, all these links as well for you to have on our website and also in these slides. We also have continuing education on our website. These recordings will expire April 1st. We have one that talks about SNAP and nutrition security policy in Iowa. And then also one where we talked to different states that are also kind of similarly trying to figure out how to advocate for licensure in their state. And then we also have a handout about how you can sign up for bills of interest yourself. So if you have a topic that you're really concerned about, we have a handout on that. Please just let us know what else you'd like to see about policy. I plan a lot of these continuing education events, so would love to hear what topics you're passionate about. During our session last year, people were asking about nutrition security, and so that's why we ended up hosting one with the Iowa Hunger Coalition about SNAP and nutrition security policy. So I do look at the surveys, and with that, we have a survey link for you to give us some input about this session. That will also, once you fill out the survey, you'll have access to the CEU's certificate. I will say, if you're watching this later, and I'll put this in an email as well for all those that signed up, the recording certificates do take a couple of weeks. So we have to submit after the webinar for this to be approved for CEUs for recording. And that just takes a couple of weeks. But the live certificate will be available right away for those of us that joined today. And again, we'll follow up via email.